Welcome into Inside the Arc. I am Alec Bussey, joined as always by Brandon Simberg. Brandon, how are we doing? Thanks for coming on again.
Yeah, fighting fall allergies right now. So if I sound a little congested, that's what that is. Don't worry, mom. I don't have COVID. I am vaccinated. But yeah, other than that, just counting down the days till basketball. We're officially less than 1 month away. So how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm super excited. School has been has been more of a focus, I guess, this week because Illinois football is on a bye week. I love when Illinois is on a bye week. It gives me opportunities to consume more basketball content. It gives me an opportunity to enjoy my free time a little bit more. So I'm a big fan of the bye weeks. We got one more of those coming up this year, and Illinois football just isn't a lot of fun to cover right now because they're not very good. So yeah, excited for basketball. They've actually got a scrimmage in about 9 days, I think, which is super crazy that it's coming up on us that fast. Tickets went on sale for that this week, so fans can buy those. I'll be inside State Farm Center for that. So I feel like everything basketball season is just really starting to pick up, Sim.
Yeah, I won't be there for that. I'm actually going to Io DeSumu's first career NBA game, or first home game at least, the Friday night before. So I won't be there for the scrimmage, but I can report back on Io if he plays.
All right, that's needed. Do you expect him to be on the Bulls opening night roster?
I think he'll be on the roster, but just what I've read from Bulls beat writers, like it sounds like he's a little deeper in the rotation, but who knows? Pelicans don't have Zion opening night. Maybe the Bulls have been playing great. Maybe they get big and they want to put the hometown kid in. So I'm hoping to see him play.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it. I mean, I think earlier in the summer, if you would have been like, "Oh, he's going to be on the roster or for night one," I've been like, "All right, like whatever, like let's see where he's at middle of the season." But everything that you've kind of told me, everything that I've kind of read is that he's been really good in practice. He's been kind of exceeding their expectations to start the season, so that's good. And we obviously saw what he did against the Cavs in winning time. I mean, he's just doing IO things with pulled the same move on Xavier that he did on Xavier Simpson. I like that. How do you not know that that's the move he's going to try and make at that point, right? Like,
How much Illinois basketball do you think Shetty Osman has watched in the last two? How much college
probably
basketball do you
none.
think Shetty Osman's watched? So
I've never even heard of Shetty Osman. Is that how you say it?
yeah.
Yeah, I've never even heard of him. So like none, probably. Anyway, we do have a really fun episode coming up with a really exciting guest. Make sure to stay tuned for that. I'm going to keep that name a secret. But before we get into that, Sam, I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about that open scrimmage. I know you weren't there, but some takeaways that I had, I was really impressed with Andre Curbello's ability to get into the paint and get into, I guess, kind of inside the defense in a way a little bit and still get to the rim. We saw him do that last year and was really, really impressive with that, especially as a true freshman. But at that open practice, he kind of took it to another level. And his shooting, he looked really confident shooting. I don't remember him hitting a bunch of threes in a row or anything. And he still kind of fades away a little bit, which is kind of concerning. But I do think that he was really impressive. I was really, really impressed with what I saw out of Alfonso Plummer and his shooting abilities. He is a microwave. And we were kind of talking about this today. His jump shot is just super pure. He gets up, he elevates, the backspin on it, the way it comes out of his hand. It's exactly like what a fundamental jump shot looks like. Luke Goody was really impressive for me amongst the freshmen. I question how much of a role he's going to have this year. I think he's probably the most likely of the three freshmen to have a role because I think he's the most physically ready. I think defensively it'll be tough for him to maybe make a huge impact for Illinois, but the other two freshmen are just kind of still developing physically, especially Melendez. He's just really long and wiry, but you can kind of see it in flashes there. Austin Hutcherson, I think this is actually the first time I've ever seen him play. He was a little loose with his handle, I will say, and they kind of had him in that backup point guard thing that Underwood mentioned a few weeks ago. So I'm interested to see if that sticks right now. I feel like Trent's probably more likely the backup point guard, but overall, like they were pretty impressive with me and they did a lot of 5-on-5 stuff.
Yeah, so I think the one thing I wanted to see most, and one of the things I'm looking forward to, especially in these exhibition and early non-conference games, is what do the freshmen look like? So you mentioned Luke, but what did you kind of see from RJ Melendez and Brandon Podziemski?
RJ's really long and he's a really good athlete. And that's something that's really something I feel like we kind of knew coming in. But again, like he just needs to develop his body a little bit more. And he's really long. I think he's going to struggle in the Big Ten, especially physically, to really like bang in the post. Not that he's a post player, but like he's going to have to do that with the position that he's going to play. And I just don't expect him to have a major impact this year. I will say that Brandon Podziemski he's got a nice jump shot. Like he doesn't elevate very well off the ground. And that's kind of concerning, especially when you kind of think about where the Big Ten's going. I feel like the Big Ten's getting really long and starting to get more athletic, especially at the wing position. So I'm interested to see how well that develops for him coming into the next couple of years. But again, he needs to develop his body. He's bigger than I thought he was. Like seeing him on the court and actually playing basketball and in a practice uniform, like he's physically more impressive than Melendez, but I think he's just strong. He's not basketball strong. Does that make sense? Like he has the muscle mass, but he doesn't have necessarily like the movement skills that you want out of someone coming in. And maybe this goes back to his military academy background. I don't know too much about what he was doing in high school, but I feel like he's not super limber. He's kind of heavy.
Yeah, no, that makes sense from everything I read and kind of seen when I watched film on him. The last guy I want to touch about, obviously I had to bring him up. My guy, Coleman Hawkins. How did he look in the scrimmage?
Coleman was good defensively. I still think he needs to develop his game offensively. And I still think physically he's not strong enough to compete with some Big Ten fours. Like, let's use EJ Liddell as an example. And this probably isn't the best example to use because EJ is one of the better players in the country. But Coleman's got good size on him, but I think he would struggle to. I think Coleman could defend EJ Liddell, but I think that EJ could kind of knock him around a little bit in the post. And that's something that I think is somewhat concerning if you're Illinois and where you can kind of use him and use him effectively this year. I think I don't expect him to be in the starting lineup to start the year. I'll put that. I know that's kind of been floating around a little bit on Twitter and in the Illinois basketball universe of, well, what if Austin Hutcherson and Coleman Hawkins can get into the starting lineup for that first game against Jackson State on November 9th. I don't expect that to happen for either of them, but I think it could happen by the end of the year. I think they're going to take some getting used to this kind of role. And this is something I've said to you in the past, right? It's like, we all expect Coleman to take this jump, but I think it's going to be, people are going to forget how big of a jump it's actually going to be for him. To go from not even playing in a lot of Big Ten games for Illinois last year to being what they're like seventh guy, maybe their sixth man. I mean, probably not their sixth man, but like their seventh guy playing a key role. Like that's a really big jump for a kid. And I know there's a huge jump from freshman to sophomore, but I don't think that jump's going to happen immediately. Like I think it'll happen maybe around Christmas, after the new year. I think that's maybe when we start to see Coleman Hawkins kind of get his feet going. Kind of around the same time we saw Jacob Grandison get going a little bit last year. Because think back to what Jacob Grandison, like he didn't play a whole lot before Christmas last year. And then he kind of got inserted into the starting lineup after that Penn State game and things kind of started to go for him. I think it'll just take a little bit for Coleman and Austin Hutcherson to get their feet wet and really feel comfortable.
Yeah, in Coleman's defense, I don't think many people can guard EJ Liddell. So,
no.
And when we play EJ, and when Illinois plays EJ Liddell, like he's always a matchup problem. But I do think Coleman, I do agree. Like Coleman's definitely gotten stronger, but he's still not like Big Ten strong. But he might be the tallest power forward in the league, like in 6'10". That might be the tallest four that you put next to Kofi. Like that's just a giant team. So yeah, I'm obviously excited to watch Coleman Hawkins play basketball again.
I think he's going to be good. I just think it's going to take him some time to develop. And I really like his defensive versatility. And I know I was just kind of not praising him on defense because of his lack of physical strength, but I do think that he has the ability to at least guard 2 through 5. I feel like there's people out there that think he can maybe guard a bigger one, and maybe he could, but I don't see that yet this year. But that's something that Illinois hasn't had. They haven't had someone that's been able to guard 4 positions and do it effectively, especially 2 through 5. And that's just a really weird combination to be able to guard those 4. Like a lot of people who can guard 4 position, it's 1 through 4 and they can't guard the 5. Coleman's going to be able to guard the 5, I think, once he gets strong enough to do it.
Yeah, so I agree. I think Coleman's going to be a versatile defender. I think he could be I think they'll play Omar Payne as the backup 5, but like, I don't know, there were rare situations last year when Kofi and Georgie got in foul trouble and they turned to Benjamin Bossmans for dunk, and like, I think they turned to Coleman this year in those scenarios. So I think
I do want to hit on Omar Payne here real quick. And I feel like now I'm going to be added to the Omar Payne hype train, and I don't know if I want to be there. He's good. Like he's really good, Sim. Like I didn't see him shoot a mid-range jump shot. I'm going to say that I did not see him do that. And Brad Underwood and Jeff Alexander have both kind of said like, hey, like he can shoot it. Like I didn't see that. So I'm withholding judgment there, but Sim, he's got a natural athleticism to him that Kofi Coburn just doesn't have like the way that Omar is able to just run up and down the floor. He just kind of looks like a gazelle. Like he doesn't put much effort into running. And I feel like when I watch Kofi run the floor, it looks like it's hard for Kofi to do it sometimes, but that makes sense because Kofi's 7 foot and he's close to 300 pounds. Omar's not that size. He's 6'10" and I think like 240, 250 maybe. I don't know off the top of my head, but like he runs really well. He explodes off the ground. Kofi, I feel like it takes him a second to get off the ground because of his extra weight. Like Omar can't be as physical in the paint as Kofi is, but he explodes off and his arms are so long. Like they are so long. I was talking to your friend Drew Casey about this at the open practice. They were going down to the length of his shorts. And I get like shorts are kind of coming back for basketball, but he was rocking like, I don't know, like mid thigh length shorts, a little bit longer than that probably. And his arms are going down there. Like I can see why he is a legitimate shot blocking threat. And he's impressive. And Illinois has not had very many good big men in the last decade. I'm willing to venture and say he might be their second best big man in the last decade behind Kofi. Like he's up there with Nana Agwu, probably.
Yeah, I think those are all good things. For me, my thing with Omar was he always had flashes at Florida. It was just about getting them consistently in the game. So like I'm gonna like withhold on the hype until I see him excel in his role, because as a backup center last year at Florida, he was just kind of up and down. Like you saw the flashes and you were like, that's a guy, and it just wasn't always there. Your point about him not hitting a jump shot would also concern me, because there's buzz and there's hype about they could play together. I read a story from another Illinois beat writer who was talking about Omar's jumper and how they could play together. And I just don't see it right now. You know, like I think Omar's going to be a star in his backup center role. I think that should be his goal. But like, if you're putting Kofi and Omar on the court at the same time, and Curbelo, he's probably going to be an average shooter at best this year, like that's a terrible shooting lineup. The spacing is going to be awful. So I do think Omar will excel in his role as the backup center, but I'm not like getting all the way on the hype train until it becomes a starting center next year.
I just look at his game and I think it's really impressive the things he's able to do, just physically speaking. Like it's something that Illinois hasn't really had. And it's intriguing to me because he's kind of an antithesis to what Kofi is and what Kofi has kind of been for Illinois the last couple of years. Because Kofi's so big and he's so much stronger than a lot of people he plays against. And that makes him really difficult to defend. So I am really interested to see what kind of role Omar is able to carve out, because to me, like that's the most difficult thing for me to project for him, because I just don't know how many minutes he's able to get. Like he's at most, I feel like he's getting 15, because that would be Kofi's playing about 25. And that would be a decrease out of what we've seen from Kofi in the last couple of years. Now, maybe Illinois feels comfortable enough to do that with Kofi this year because they have a backup 5 and Omar that they're able to use and feel more confident in than what they had with Georgie Bishanishvili at the 5 the last couple of years. And maybe that's what happens. But I don't know why you would want to take Kofi off the floor if you don't have to, unless your goal is to keep him super fresh for late in the game. But that's kind of like where you at with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Kofi is supposed to be one of the top 3 to 5. Some people say 1 best players in the country. You want that guy in the court as much as possible. So yeah, we'll see what Omar's role is. That's gonna be super interesting. I do think Brad should try it out in one of these like games they're gonna for sure win, just for shits and giggles to see what they have, but I don't have high hopes for it. Before our guest comes on, you had a busy week last week. You were at the scrimmage on Friday, and then you were at Big Ten Media Days on Thursday as well, and you got to listen to Brad Underwood, Kofi Coburn, Andre Curbelo, but also some other Big Ten players and coaches. Did you have any big takeaways from that event in Indianapolis?
Well, first of all, I was super excited to go into it. But second of all, I think the biggest takeaway from everyone from Big Ten Basketball Media Days was Hunter Dickinson taking another shot at Illinois. And I would like to say this was on a question that I asked him. And I said to someone, I forget who, I was like, he's not going to like this. Like, but I had to ask him. I was like, I was told to write a story on this. And I think everyone kind of saw the quote, and he kind of prefaced it with like, and he kind of walked back a little bit what he said this summer about how no one in the Big Ten likes Illinois. But he was like, hey, like, I have no problem with Kofi. Like Curbelo, I don't know him very well, but he seems cool. Like Coach Underwood's done a good job of building that program, but like, I don't know much history that Illinois has in the last whatever time frame he said. And what he said about Illinois fans being annoying, like, I can see that being true. Like, there's times I get Illinois fans in my mentions and I'm like, can you please be quiet? Like, just be kind to other people. Like, hold your thoughts. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. I will say this though. I love how candid he is. He's a content magnet. And in this era where like people just don't say things in the media that ruffle feathers, it's refreshing to have someone say things that they actually mean. And I really appreciated his honesty about that. I think it's great for college basketball. I think it's great for a budding rivalry. And while Hunter Dickinson's willing to say those things, I also had asked Juwan Howard the same things. And he refused to like even acknowledge that there was maybe an extra little bit of animosity between Illinois and Michigan based off the things that have happened in the last couple of years and in whatever other circumstances you want to have. And I get why Juwan Howard is doing that because he's a coach and he doesn't want to disrespect another program in the Big Ten. And he kind of was like, hey, like every single night we play a really good team in the Big Ten. And yeah, Illinois is part of that, but every other team in the Big Ten is good as well. So I get why Juwan Howard didn't do it. I would have loved to have heard him say like, yeah, like I don't like Illinois back when I played. They chanted crack house at my teammate, Jalen Rose. So like, but he didn't say that. And I understand why he didn't say it, but it was a really good experience. And I'm still able to keep churning out content from that event too. So.
Yeah. Like you said, I think with Dickinson and just with players in general, this is a different era where this isn't like the 80s and 90s where I think there was more actual player animosity. I think today's age, you have all these guys have played like on the Nike EYBL together. They've done like these elite camps together. Social media brings guys together. Like these players have known each other or known about each other for years. So there really is an animosity between the players. Now that's what makes the fans so great because they're the ones who can hop on Twitter and say things and bicker with each other. And are Illinois fans annoying to Hunter Dickinson? Absolutely, as they should be. That's their job. Michigan fans, they're annoying to Illinois players or Illinois fans, I'm sure. So
or to every other school in the country at this point.
I think every fan base is annoying when they get in each other's mentions.
Yeah, that's true.
I think every time I see an Illinois tweet on my Twitter feed, like whether like from a national writer, whether it's like, Eamon Brennan or Brian Hamilton from The Athletic, Jeff Goodman, John Rothstein, there's always some Michigan fan in the comments saying, bring up the Loyola loss. And then the Illinois fans are bringing up how Juwan Howard's 0-3 against Brad Underwood. And am I a little sick of seeing the same jokes? Yeah, I'd like some new content. But I just think it's great that these fan bases don't like each other. And, Illinois fans will have a chance to show Hunter Dickinson what they're about on January 14th. So
I can't wait for that game. That's going to be so much fun just to be able to hear Orange Crush kind of like, just give it all to him. And knowing him, like he's going to welcome it. And he's going to be like, what else? Like, I can't hear you. Like, give me some more. And that's awesome. That's what makes college basketball.
Yeah. I mean, Hunter Dickinson last year at Maryland, who he also has a beef with Maryland because they allegedly didn't recruit him hard enough, even though that was completely false. With no fans in the stadium, this man, every time he scored, would like stare down the Maryland bench, like flex on them, and he ended up getting a tech just for that game. So yeah, Dickinson's going to bring the energy. I will say, like, he's not some eighth man talking crap about a fan base. He's one of the best players in the country. So I respect the fact that he can talk the talk a bit, and I'm definitely excited for that game as well.
Yep. All right, let's get to our guest pretty shortly here. All right, we now welcome on Robbie Hummel to Inside the Arc. Robbie is, I think, the very first gold medalist we've ever had on the podcast, and that's a pretty cool title to claim. But he's also a former killer of the Fighting Illini, of course, when he was at Purdue and just tore apart the rest of the Big Ten. Robbie, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Well, let's kind of dive right into it. The Big Ten is going to be really entertaining, especially at the top when you have Michigan, Purdue, and Illinois, I think, is in that group as well, especially on the national scene. I think a lot of people kind of expect that. What are you kind of looking at the top of the Big Ten with those three teams?
Yeah, I just think that it's interesting because when you look at Illinois and you look at Purdue, those two teams certainly return a ton of guys, and Michigan returns a good amount as well. But I think Michigan is maybe counting on. They got a grad transfer point guard. They've got a highly recruited freshman who's super well thought of. But again, we haven't seen him play a college basketball game. Eli Brooks is somebody that he comes back. That's certainly big for Juwan Howard. Hunter Dickinson was the big one that came back. But I'm really intrigued to see Michigan play. I think that it's, fair to say that they're going to be a top 3 team, but they do have some unknowns. Whereas you look at Illinois and you look at Purdue, those 2 teams returned so many guys. And I think Illinois, when you look at their team, Alfonso Plummer is a really interesting player for them. There's a lot of guys at Utah that were good players and have kind of dispersed as Coach K got let go out there. But I think Illinois has got a really good team. Kofi coming back is huge. My man Andre Curbelo is going to have a really good season. I know that's been mentioned a little bit in the Illini, probably more so on Twitter. I think really highly of Andre Curbelo. I honestly think that there's a good chance he'll be first team All Big Ten.
Just not preseason All-American, right?
My man Jeff Goodman is ready to crown him as a first team All-American, and I came off as an Illinois hater. But I'm also intrigued to see Coleman Hawkins play. I really am. I think that he's a guy that, does he slide in at the 4? Does Brad go with Jacob Grandison? There's a lot of guys where I just am really, really intrigued to see kind of how this shakes out for Illinois.
So you're speaking pretty highly of Illinois here. Are they your preseason pick to win the Big Ten?
I'm honestly, and this is going to again probably come off as I'm going to go Purdue. I just think they return so much. They're going to be huge. My question for Purdue is, can they make enough threes to keep defenses honest? And when you look at Sasha Stefanovic, Brandon Newman, Isaiah Thompson, they've got guys who have made shots. Jaden Ivey is an elite player. Their bigs are really good. I'm going to go Purdue.
Rob, you kind of mentioned Jaden Ivey there. I kind of was writing down today, just kind of taking notes. He averaged around 11 points a game, and obviously you're around that Purdue program a bunch as a former player. And I'm huge on Jaden Ivey. Like, you can ask Brandon, you can ask anyone who listens. Like, Jaden Ivey is like my guy. Like, I kind of crowned him as one of my people early last season. You said he's an elite player. Like, is he really as good as we think he is, or is there still areas of his game that he needs to really improve to get to the next level?
Well, I think that's part of probably what makes the upside of him so high, right? He's already a really good player, and he hasn't really shot it great, especially at the college level. Now, he did finish the year last year shooting the ball better from 3. That's going to probably determine his ceiling. I mean, I think when you watch the games, Jaden Ivey moves different than most of the guys on the floor. I am so envious as a former player of watching him defend, where he's just like gliding, and like for me, man, I had to really try. Like, it doesn't look like he's trying. Which, you see that with elite athletes, whether that's at the NBA level or the college level. He is a freak athletically. So I just think his ability to get to the basket, he cannot settle for contested threes. He has got to get to the rim. And I think that as long as his mindset is get to the basket, take open threes when they're there, I don't think Jaden Ivey should be taking contested pull-up 3-point shots. If you've got it going, that's another thing. But he's got to stay in attack mode. But I also think, and I've read where Matt Painter has tried to challenge him on this, and Paul Lusk, one of Purdue's assistants, has as well, for him to be the best two-way player in the league. I mean, he totally has the tools to do that. Now, Willie, we'll see. That's yet to be determined.
So there's definitely comps that have floated around out there for Ivy, and I feel like one of them is someone that Illinois fans know really well, and obviously that's Io. And you kind of look at their freshman numbers; they're pretty similar. But when I watch Ivy, and this is an extreme exaggeration, I think, but like I see shades of Ja Morant and the way he explodes off the ground. Yeah. You kind of mentioned it with the way he moves defensively; he just kind of flies around. Like, I'm sure that's too high, and I don't think he's going to be the number 2 pick in the draft. Yeah, right. But do you see that in his game at all?
I think the explosiveness, yeah. I mean, I kind of thought that Io was a good athlete with great length, good size. I think Jaden Ivey's probably a little bit better, or not even a little bit, but better vertical athlete than Io is. And that's not to say Io's bad. He's just, I think Jaden Ivey is in that like 99th percentile type deal. From an explosive standpoint, yes. Now, certainly Ja Morant as a passer, as a playmaker, he is elite. But I think that from an athletic standpoint, I think you could say that the explosion is definitely a comparison you can make there. It's going to be really interesting to see what kind of season Jaden has. I just think it does change when you become the top guy in the scouting report, and he's going to be there this year.
So, Robbie, I'm actually with you. I also think Purdue, they're my preseason pick to win the league. And I think the way Jeff Goodman feels about Andre Curbelo is how I feel about Jaden Ivey. I watched those USA U19 games this summer, and Chet Holmgren was their best player, but Jaden Ivey was 1B. Like, he was fantastic on both ends of the floor. I trust their depth. I mean, you look at their front court, Trevion Williams and Zach Edey, you're getting 40 minutes out of those guys at center a night. That's two different looks too. You know, Trevion's more of he kind of works from the free throw line and like the perimeter a bit and dribble handoffs and stuff like that, and has a good post game. And then, I mean, Zach is huge. And then I like their fours, Mason Gillis when he returns from his suspension. Caleb First impressed me. So I think they have options up front. In the backcourt, you know, Hunter is a senior now. So I'm with you. Purdue is my pick to win the league. And Jaden Ivey's actually, I think he's going to player of the year. I think he's going to turn some heads in the league. He's going to be exciting. We know he's clutch. So I'm with you on Purdue.
Well, I appreciate that. But at the same time, it would not surprise me if Michigan won the league, if Illinois won the league. You know, there are other really good teams here. I think Ohio State is kind of flying maybe a bit under the radar in terms of the discussion of winning the Big Ten. Maryland is going to be really good. You know, Michigan State, I think just from talking to Tom Izzo at Media Day, I think he really likes the fact that no one is talking about the Spartans, you know, and they bring some talent back. They certainly lost a decent amount with Aaron Henry taking off, but you know, I do think that Tom Izzo really likes his group, and I think it's honestly just setting up for another great year in the Big Ten is what it is.
So you mentioned Michigan there. They're the team that I have tabbed at the top of the Big Ten. And I think it's one of those things where I just bet on talent. And when I was talking with you and Jeff Goodman at Big Ten Media Days, he was kind of like, well, yeah, but like, we don't really know how good a lot of their freshmen are. Like Musa Diabate is a top 15, top 20 national recruit. Caleb Houston is a top 10, top 15 national recruit. Like when you look at some of their freshmen and they come in, are they as good as we think they are? Or how well do you think they can kind of all fit together?
I mean, that's a great question. You know, like the rankings say yes, but college basketball is a whole nother deal. You know, I think last year it was really cool to see how well Mike Smith fit in with their team.
Yeah,
and we don't see that with grad transfers all the time. You know, especially one that's such a high volume guy when he's in college, at Columbia. He was jacking because he had to. You know, he was really their main source of offense at his old school. So he gets to Michigan, and he has a really good season, and he runs the show. Does Devontae Jones do the same thing? You know, that's yet to be seen. Then you talk about the freshman, Caleb Houston, you know, Musa. Those two guys, their rankings say they're going to be good, but we really don't know yet. Now, the good thing for those two guys is you're putting them around really experienced players, and Hunter Dickinson, you know, Eli Brooks, Brandon Johns, you know, some of the other guys that played a little bit, whether that's Zeb Jackson, Terrence Williams, whoever, they're going to be around guys that are experienced. I think Juwan Howard's done a phenomenal job from just managing the program and coaching at Michigan so far. He's got a great staff. I think they're going to be really good, but like Jeff was saying at Media Day, the jury is just still out until we see these guys actually play.
I think the Mike Smith point is a really good one because he was such a key part of their offense last year. Like
Sure.
You could argue that Dickinson and Wagner and Livers were maybe their best players, but I really think he made that team run. And from what I've seen from Devontae Jones, he was more of a scorer at Coastal, and I saw him at the G League Elite Camp, and he has a nice scoring package. Like that guy is going to get buckets in this league, but do they have the true point guard initiator? I like what I've seen from Frankie Collins, one of their freshmen, but like you said, it's hard to tell how good freshmen are going to be. So I do like Michigan. I think they might have the most upside, but you know, the Big Ten night in, night out, 20 games, you can't really take a game off like a Nebraska could get you, Penn State could get you. I don't trust them to do that as much as I trust Purdue and their infrastructure. So that's why I lean Purdue.
Yep.
So another team that I think the three of us are all pretty high on, and it's definitely gonna make some happy, is Indiana. And it's a program that
Wait, since when are you high on Indiana? You've texted me every day.
I've kind of changed my mind in last week. I've kind of changed my mind. Okay. I like what they're doing
with the Kool-Aid here.
I kind of like what they're doing with all their transfers. I read the Mike Smith or I read the Mike Woodson article in The Athletic yesterday, and it kind of got me fired up for Indiana. All right. I like Xavier Johnson. He's a good player. Robbie, what do you kind of see out of Indiana? And if you want to take any jabs about how good you were against Indiana in your career, just be my guest.
Well, I will say I love Assembly Hall. I think I love both Assembly Halls, whether it's in Champaign or also, Bloomington. But I think the arena down there and the atmosphere, I visited for Duke, Indiana as a junior in high school. And I will never forget what it was like. Marco Killingsworth, I don't know if you guys remember him, he was a transfer from Auburn, got a dunk that took it, Duke called timeout to take it to the under 4 media timeout. And it put Indiana up 1. And it was like the roof was going to blow off this place. I mean, it was incredible. Before the game, there were all these random people coming up to me just like, Robbie, come to Indiana. And like, I mean, as a 17-year-old kid, you're like, this is amazing. This atmosphere is incredible. And, it's a game where JJ Redick goes for 30 and ends up just killing in the last 4 minutes. It was sweet. So that was my first experience of ever going to Assembly Hall in Bloomington. But I think that they've put together a really deep roster. They've done it with some transfers. They've got some returnees. Obviously, it all starts with Trace Jackson Davis. He's an elite player. He's a big-time athlete. I'm curious to see, is he still all left jump hook? Can he make a jump shot to 15 feet now? Is he going to make free throws? There's certainly some things that he had. I'm not going to say gaping holes because he's a really good player, but he's got serious places where he can really improve. It's going to start with him. And I think this is everybody that watched Indiana last year. Can they make some perimeter jump shots? Now, they've added some pieces. Well, that's Parker Stewart, who sat out at the end of last season. Miller Kopp from Northwestern. Can Rob Finney find some consistency that's really eluded him throughout his career? Xavier Johnson, I feel like there's been so many transfers from Pittsburgh who have gone other places and just been so good, but they never win. It's like, where do these good players keep coming from the University of Pittsburgh? Race Thompson's still there. Michael Durr is an interesting transfer too. He's huge. And I had a couple of, it was USF, right, Brandon? South Florida?
Yeah, South Florida.
I couldn't remember if it was UCF. Yeah, USF. I had a couple of their games last year. He is enormous. So just to bring that size, rim protection, they're going to have depth in the front court. Christian Lander's an interesting kind of player for them. I wonder if it's going to work. I really do. Last year, he just looked so overwhelmed at times. And maybe a year, no COVID, get in the weight room, get another year of experience. But there's a lot to like. Tamar Bates is a really talented freshman. He's a really talented freshman. He played really well in their Church of the Bahamas, which honestly looks sick. If you're going to take a foreign trip, the Atlantis is a heck of a place to go. But I think Indiana's going to be good. I really do.
Yeah, you said all things that make my heart warm. So that was good. And I will say on Lander, I was super high on him coming into last year, but he skipped his senior year of high school.
Yeah,
so,
right. He's 18 years old.
Yeah. So I almost, and last year with the COVID year and the limited offseason, like I'm really looking at this as his freshman offseason. So I feel like Purdue, Michigan, and Illinois is kind of like your top three. Where does Indiana kind of fall for you range wise?
Yeah, if those are my top three, and if I leave anybody out, please remind me. I think Maryland is probably in that second tier. I think Ohio State is in that second tier. I think Michigan State's right there. And I would throw Indiana on the back end of that.
Robbie, I kind of wanted to follow up with Christian Lander. I kind of think he's the biggest key, or maybe the biggest X factor for them being as good as we maybe think they can be, because you kind of hit on a lot of things we said there, but I feel like he's such an X factor where he hits with his talent this year and with a better developer of talent and Mike Woodson, because I don't really think you can get much worse if you're Indiana in that area, especially with the guards and the spacing that they played with. Do you kind of agree that he's kind of their biggest X factor in terms of how successful they can be this year?
I think the point guard position it might not be Christian Lander. It could be Xavier Johnson. It could be Rob Finney. I think they certainly need somebody to facilitate the offense. But to me, the biggest X factor for Indiana is perimeter shooting. It's just, you see it every game. Defenses were we're overloading I mean, they're just sitting in there. There's nowhere to drive. There's nowhere to go. It's hard for Trace Jackson Davis to operate. So I just think that, can you kind of open up those defenses with some shooting? That'll be huge. But point guard play will be enormous for them as well.
Yeah, so that's why I'm higher on Indiana. I think they're like the fourth best team in the league. I would have them fourth because I think they fixed, or they at least attempted to solve their two biggest issues, which is a real point guard in Xavier Johnson and the shooting. You know, I've had people tell me, oh, like Miller Kopp isn't, he's not that good, but Miller Kopp probably can't be your number one guy like he was at Northwestern, but I mean, you have him spotting up off of Trace Jackson.
I totally agree with you. As a catch and shoot weapon,
he's
big, really good. He can thrive in that role, I think.
Yeah, and I think we didn't talk about Mike Woodson, but I don't know how good of a coach he's going to be. I'm not saying he's going to be Juwan Howard, but I think it's going to be an upgrade over Archie Miller, and they should play more modern and with more spacing. So that's kind of the reason I'm higher on them, and I think they're the fourth best team in the league. I
will say I think Coach Woodson has put together a really good staff. I really do think he's done a great job of molding some college and NBA. So yeah, I'm really intrigued to see what they run this year.
Robbie, before we get to Maryland, I kind of want to keep on Indiana with one thing. We talked about this at Media Days. We think they could be really interesting if they run an NBA style offense and how the problems that could cause in the Big Ten with the style that Michigan plays and Illinois plays as well, just because the Big Ten is filled with all of these like traditional bigs that just are not great at like spacing the floor and hitting perimeter jump shots or even mid-range jump shots. And some of them, like Kofi, struggled to pass out of the post, and even Hunter Dickinson struggled with that at times last year. Like, how much of a problem do you think that could cause in the Big Ten if that's what Indiana does?
Yeah, I think that when you look at their personnel, though, can Race Thompson be that kind of stretch five? He'd probably be the best. It's not going to be Michael Durr, and it's not going to be Trace Jackson Davis. So if he can pick and pop, think about how hard it was. And this is an extreme. I'm not saying Race Thompson is going to be Luka Garza, but think about how those guys, I mean, it was a problem because he's picking and popping and the floor is spread. And it's just hard for guys like Kofi and Hunter to kind of, show and recover or whatever, ice the ball screen and get back. You're going to have to rotate. And when you get in rotation, now all of a sudden you're putting your defense at a disadvantage. So it's all about personnel. If Race Thompson can pick and pop and shoot 40%, heck yeah, that would be a problem for those guys. It's going to be really hard for them to move like that. But I think the jury is certainly out on whether he can do that. I know I read an article where he said he's stretched his range, but I think every player in college basketball feels like they've stretched their range if they didn't shoot it great last year. So we'll see.
Yeah, I love following like beat reporters on Twitter, and then they go to media day, and every coach says every player who couldn't really shoot last year can now hit 10 to 15 footers.
Stretching it out, right?
And then we never see them take a 15-footer in the games. So I think one of the more interesting teams to me, and I think they have a really wide range because I'm not exactly sure how good they're going to be, is Maryland. What are your initial thoughts on the Terps this year?
Yeah, I think because of the transfers, they are in that second tier. Eric Ayala is a really good piece. He's been a really good player for Mark Turgeon for a couple years now. Hakeem Hart and Dante Scott also, big physical. Hakeem Hart's more of a guard. Dante Scott's like a four-man that can put it on the floor, put you in the basket, can shoot it a little bit. The transfers are why. I'm not sure I'm saying my man's name right from Georgetown. I think his last name's, I don't even know. I'll learn, but I haven't learned yet.
Something Wuhab.
Yeah. But I've seen him play. He's a good player, and Fats Russell can really go. He's a good defensive player, and he had a really good career at Rhode Island, and he can hoop. So I think that those transfers really kind of bring them into that tier. The bench is definitely has some question marks. And again, you've got some transfers there, whether that's Simon Wright from Elon or Xavier Green from Old Dominion. James Graham is a guy who played for I think he got to campus in February or January, real late. So he'll have a year of an off season under his belt. Ian Martinez also from Utah. So Mark Turgeon really just loaded up on transfers. And those two guys in the starting lineup, my man from Georgetown and Fats, they're good players, man.
I think my biggest concern with Maryland is they were 8th in the Big Ten last year, and they were definitely better the second half of the season, but they lost their best player in Aaron Wiggins, and they lost like the quintessential program guy in Daryl Morcell.
I was surprised he left. I was really surprised. I felt like he really enjoyed playing at Maryland, and him and Coach Turgeon got along real well. It seemed like they could have used him. I mean, the game in Illinois last year, my goodness, he was locking up. He can really guard. So I was surprised to see him go to Marquette.
From my understanding, everyone in the program thought Wiggins was going to come back. And Daryl may not have been guaranteed a starting spot. And then Aaron Wiggins kills the NBA Combine and leaves suddenly, but Daryl had already decided to leave at that point. So it was just kind of bad timing, but it's going to be weird watching that guy in a Marquette jersey. Like he's from Baltimore. He feels like a Maryland guy.
Yeah. I mean, he was a Baltimore guy, grew up wanting to play there. It's too bad it worked out like that, but we'll see.
So I kind of want to ask about Ohio State, and everyone knows that like EJ Liddell is like my guy. I feel like he's almost being slightly overlooked when we talk about the top.
You guarded him, right?
I did.
How did it go?
He scored 25 on me, but I scored 10 on him. So like, we're going to leave it at that. We don't
15,
need to get further into the details. I also almost got dunked on by Jordan Goodwin, who played at SLU. That was embarrassing. That was in the 6th grade. My coach didn't put me in a position to be successful, Robbie. It's really unfortunate when that happens.
It happens.
Anyway, so EJ is a guy that I kind of wanted to ask about because I feel like he's almost being overlooked when you talk about the top of the Big Ten and the players. Like it's Kofi, it's Hunter Dickinson, and then EJ kind of like slots in there, but like people are even throwing like Ivy up there, and people are throwing, Trace Jackson Davis and guys like Jeff Goodman, or even throwing Andre Curbelo up there at that same kind of conversation level.
Yeah, I think EJ Liddell is definitely flying under the radar. He looked really trim at Big Ten Media Day.
Yeah, he looked slim.
I mean, usually last year he got his butt on you. It was over with. He would bury you. I'm kind of curious. He's one of those guys that's going to fall into the category of, are they going to try to prove that they can do something that they really aren't that good at? Like, is he going to just jack threes this year? I know he can make them, but him playing to some of his strengths is where his strengths lie, right? And there's times where guys, they want to prove they can shoot, and all I do is prove that they can't shoot. So I really like EJ Liddell. I think he is a junkyard dog. I think he plays hard. He seems like a great kid. So I've enjoyed watching his, now 2 years in the Big Ten. But I think he totally is flying under the radar for as good of a player as he is. And they have a really good team. Kyle Young coming back for an extra year is big. I like the Jabari Wheeler addition.
Me too.
He's been a thorn in Ohio State's side. That dude can guard. I mean, he gets after the ball. Seth Towns, I think, was he hurt this summer again?
I think so. Yeah, that sounds right.
I'm pretty sure he was. Yeah, when he's been able to play, he's a good player, but he's kind of a question mark. Arns kind of took the next step last year as a shooter. Like his game. The freshman Branham is supposed to be really, really good. Now, I haven't seen him play, but he's supposed to be a really ready Big Ten player. Justice Suing is a good Big Ten player. They've got a nice team. I mean, they really have a nice team, but I'm totally with you, Alec. I think EJ Liddell is rolling under the radar, and it's not right.
Feed me all the EJ Liddell praise, Robbie. I love it. I was able to ask him at Media Days last week about what NBA teams kind of told him, and they were like, go back to college and fine tune some things, but don't forget who you are. Like, don't step out and start shooting a bunch of threes, and don't try and, be the lead ball handler and put all these moves on guys, because that's not your game, and your game fits in the NBA if you can fine tune different things and improve your 3-point jump shot just a little bit. So I'm really excited to see where he improves this year.
Totally. I mean, it just makes sense. If you're playing away from your strengths, it's not going to be a good thing for most of those guys, or almost all of those guys. So I guess we'll see how well he takes that that advice, because some players, they hear that and it still is, I got to shoot threes, I got to handle the ball, I got to do this. Whereas he's been really successful just being himself.
So you touched on their guards a bit, and I think Ohio State's backcourt is one of the more interesting units in the Big Ten, because you lose Walker and Washington, who'd kind of been staples for you. And Washington, he won them some games with his microwave scoring ability.
Sure.
And they have this interesting group. They brought Wheeler from Penn State. Michi Johnson, who's another young freshman, is back. Jimmy Sotos was a guy at Bucknell. He's still on the roster, and Cedric Russell from Louisiana Tech, I want to say. Who in their backcourt do you think can help them fill the void that Walker and Washington is going to leave?
Yeah, I think Jabari Wheeler is going to play a ton. I think Malachi Branham is going to play a good amount. Justice Suing will be at the 3. And then I think Jimmy Soto's got some tick last year before he hurt his shoulder. So he'll be in the mix there. Justin Arms will be in the mix there. It'll be a by committee thing, I'm sure. And I'm not sure they have a guy like Dwayne Washington on this team at that 2 that can kind of get going like he could. He had times last year where he was unguardable. And you're right, CJ Walker was very, very solid for them. So I think that it's going to be a mix of those guys. But I do think Jabari Wheeler will play a ton of minutes at the point.
Do you think that Joey Brunk is the biggest X factor for them? Because we know EJ doesn't really want to play the 5 for them, but he's not terrible at it. Same with Kyle Young. I feel like if Joey Brunk's a top half maybe of the Big Ten center front court player, that they could maybe get up into that top 3 of the Big Ten.
I honestly like Zed Key.
Really?
Not to say that Joey Brunk won't play at all, but they do have a lot of options. I'm sure they'll start Liddell and Young together. And I would say that Young is more of the 5. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah. And how's he still in college somehow?
He's on my plan. Just never leave. I think Zed Key is definitely an option for them. And then Joey Brunk. I don't know if Brunk is necessarily an X factor for me in that regard, because I think they have a lot of options that they can throw out there and even put EJ at the 5 if they have to. But I wonder what EJ weighs. I really do.
At their roster right now, it says 240. But he didn't look like he was 240. He looked slimmer than that.
Yeah, no, he looked really skinny. Yeah, no, I agree. So I just don't know with some of that weight not on anymore, going against a guy like Hunter Dickinson or Kofi. Now they got to guard him too. So I guess it's kind of who wins that battle? Is it EJ Liddell on the perimeter or those big fellows on the block? But yeah, I think that they've got a lot of options they can throw at the 5.
So you mentioned Michigan State earlier, and I think after Maryland, they're maybe the second just most intriguing team to me because they have a lot of guys. I look at the roster, I'm like, yeah, it's a rotation player. That like he could play some minutes here, but I'm not really sure who's going to step up and be the guy for them because they have a lot of returners. Who do you think, is going to take the reins of Michigan State's offense this year and be the guy, or are they just not going to have one and be kind of a by committee team?
Well, Tyson Walker is a grad transfer. He's going to play the point. Max Christie, 5-star kid out of Illinois, really talented.
I like him.
I don't think I want to. I really like Gabe Brown. He's probably not that guy. Joey Hauser has kind of been up and down. Malik Hall's been kind of up and down. Yeah.
This is my problem with Michigan State. I don't know who their guy is.
Max Christie, that's asking an awful lot of a freshman, no matter how talented he is. Again, Tyson Walker, who knows what he looks like in the Big Ten. Good player at Northeastern. That's probably, it would have to, I would say by committee right now. I could be wrong. It could totally be a Tyson Walker or a Max Christie. But yeah, it's there's not somebody that's jumping off the page at you,
Yeah, I think Christie's the most talented. I think he's a future NBA player. It's, is Izzo like with other older wings on the roster, like Malik Hall, like Gabe Brown, is he going to be ready to let Christie kind of play his game and get a lot of minutes early? Because Jaren Jackson Jr. is one of I feel like the best players we've seen in the league recently, just from a one season standpoint. And he played like 21 minutes a game. Now they were really good. They had really good teams, but yes, he fouled a lot. But as an NBA, I'm like an NBA draft nerd. As an NBA draft nerd, it annoyed the crap out of me, like seeing Nick Ward swallow his minutes when I was like, this guy's a freak athlete. But yeah, I'm interested to see if he's going to let Christie play his game, or is Christie going to have to learn from Hall and Gabe Brown?
No, that's a great question. A very valid question. I'm curious to see if Gabe Brown makes that jump. You look at him, he's 6'8". He's super athletic. He can really shoot. His rebounding numbers have been horrific. Tom Izzo is always yelling at this dude to go rebound because he gets like 1 or 2 a game. So I'm curious to see him. I'm curious to see Joey Hauser this year. Started off the year pretty good, kind of got hurt, and it just kind of fell off a cliff for him last season. So a guy that's very talented, has played a lot of high major college basketball. I think Marcus Bingham is a question mark too. You know, he makes a couple plays a game that just make you kind of scratch your head and say, what is this guy doing?
That's Gabe Brown for me. Gabe Brown does something.
He does too.
What are you even thinking? And then Izzo will yank him and yell at him. And then 5 minutes later, he's back in the game and he does something really good. And you're like, oh, like that's what Tom Izzo sees in you. And like, I trust Tom Izzo. I put so much blind faith in Tom Izzo to get things right at Michigan State. Like even midway through last year when they weren't very good, I was like, I think they're going to be fine. Like, I think they're going to end up being in the top half of the Big Ten. And I think they were. I think they finished in the top half. I'd have to double check that.
Yeah, they were around there.
I think they were 8 or 9 because they played Maryland in the 8-9 game in the Big Ten tournament. So they were 8 or 9.
And they find their way in the NCAA tournament and then they lose to UCLA. But I feel like everyone was picking them because everyone just trusts Michigan State and trusts Tom Izzo.
I mean, he's got enough equity built up. Yeah. He's done it so many times. It's like you might as well just bet on it because more often than not, you're going to be right doing that.
So Izzo is kind of known for his fire and his, you know, he likes to get under his players' skin, tough love, but he does, you know, love them off the court. Is Matt Painter like that at all? Is he that kind of tough love guy? Or
he used to be. He used to be like that. He's way too nice to the players now. Way too nice.
Was he when you were there? Like, was he?
Yes, more so. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't, I would say it's the level of Coach Izzo or even like, I think at times Coach Underwood.
Yeah.
But he could really get after us, but I liked it. You know, I went to Purdue because I wanted to get better and I wanted to be coached hard, and he did that. And it was never personal. And it certainly was always, for the most part, I felt pretty fair. But I wanted him to coach me. I didn't go there for him to be my best friend. Now I'm lucky in hindsight, looking back now, I'm fortunate to call him my friend because I think he's a really good guy and he's a really good coach. But yeah, he used to probably be more vocal. Now he's kind of more laid back and, you know, definitely they play a little differently now. And I think he's kind of evolved as a coach and certainly has kind of mellowed out, which I miss the old Coach Paint. You know, every once in a while I'll chuck the ball off the backboard type deal. That was always good to see.
Everyone's soft these days, Robbie. Everyone's just
soft.
The kids can't handle it anymore.
It have to be like especially with the transfer rules. You yell at a dude and he's just going to leave. Like that's, and I'm not saying everybody, but there's certain situations I'm sure where kid gets yelled at practice. I'm leaving. I'm out of here. It's tough these days with the way the rules are, and I just think that the times have changed too. You know, it's not going to fly the Bobby Knight type stuff or some of that deal. It's over with, you know?
Yeah. And let's hit on one last team before we kind of wrap things up here. Rutgers is interesting, right? Like Geo Baker's back, Ron Harper Jr.'s back, Paul Mulcahy's back, but they lose their point guard and Jacob Knight, I think was his name.
Jacob Young.
Yeah, Jacob Young. There we go. And then Miles Johnson has gone out to UCLA. I think that's where he ended up at. Where do you kind of see Rutgers stacking up in things? I think Steve Pikiell's done an amazing job of actually like building a culture. Like he's done a great job over there.
He has done a phenomenal job. I think that Rutgers is outside of that second tier, and they do have some good pieces. I was really surprised that Miles Johnson left. I know he's from Southern California. I just felt like, you know, Steve Pikiell had kind of given him the keys to play a lot of minutes from his after his redshirt year on. But this really gives. I still don't know how to say this dude's last name because it changes weekly.
It changes every week.
I mean, he said Amaruyi and then he said Amorie, unknown. But I'm going to go Amaruyi. So I think this is Cliff Amaruyi's time to kind of shine. You know, he's a highly touted guy. He now has a real offseason. But I think the core in the backcourt of Geo Baker, Paul Mulcahy, Caleb McConnell's a good player.
It's true.
He might kind of get left off the list there, but he can really guard. Ron Harper Jr., obviously a really good player. I feel like the Rutgers staff is pretty high on some of the guys on their bench too. Some of the Mawat Mag hasn't played a lot. I feel like they've kind of talked about him at times. Dean Reaver played a little bit last year. He'll probably play a little bit more. It's going to be interesting to see what their bench looks like, but their starting five is very, very solid.
Yeah, for me, I think they're like they could have some really high outcomes because their team is kind of based around two really hot and cold shooting players.
Totally.
Baker.
And especially at home. You get in that environment, that place is awesome.
I think they're going to beat one of Purdue, Michigan, and Illinois at the rack this year. If those teams go there,
I would not be surprised.
They've done it the last 2 years. Illinois has gone out there and lost, I think, the last 2 years. They did for sure last year, right, Sam?
Yeah, they lost them last year. Yeah, you get Ron Harper on the right night. You get Geo Baker on the right night. That team's gonna be tough to beat. But like you said, I don't know how deep they are, and Baker and Harper can lose you game or can win you games, but they're just gonna lose you some games too.
Totally.
So
it's too bad that Jacob Young left and that Miles Johnson left, because they would be really, and Jacob Young went to Oregon and Miles Johnson's playing at UCLA, who's absolutely
the conference of champions, too enticing. The West Coast.
Right, I guess, yeah. UCLA is so loaded. I can't even fathom how many good
champion. Michigan was, I think, like 7th or 8th in the poll last year. And then 2 years ago, Wisconsin goes on that incredible run, and they weren't really supposed to be in the picture. If there was one team outside the big three that could just shock everyone to win the league, who do you think would be the most likely to do it?
All right, so you're taking away Purdue,
Michigan,
Illinois. I'm going to say Ohio State.
I feel like that's the smart answer.
Yeah, I just think they have too many good players. They have a ton of depth. Depending on how things kind of fall with some of their new guys and their transfers, they could be really, really good. And it wouldn't surprise me at all. That's probably like the wimpy pick. Like that was probably the easiest one.
But they have Chris Holtman.
Yeah, and he's a good coach. He's a really good coach.
He's a top 3-4 coach in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like he's a really good basketball coach.
His demeanor is great. He runs, he's very solid. Defensively, he's a great defensive coach. He knows what he's doing. That's for sure.
All right, I got one.
Is that your pick as well? I want, is that if you had to go a team outside the top three?
Yeah, I'm not going to feed into your Indiana as my pick for the Big Ten championship. I think they're going to be better.
Indiana's roster is really deep, though. But
unbiasedly, Indiana, I think, could be the surprise team. No team in the Big Ten has more points per game from last year in their starting five. Now, granted, it's because they have 3 transfers starting and Trace, who averaged like 20. But Indiana's my pick. I think I talked about earlier. I think they could. I'm not picking them to win the Big Ten. Like let's halt the brakes, aggregators. But I think if one team was to do it, it would be Indiana.
Robbie, I kind of want to ask one last one on my end, and then if Sim has one more, he can get it too. Do you have a preseason All Big Ten that you feel comfortable sharing, and does it change at all by the end of the year?
Okay. I haven't thought about it, but I can get one here. I would say Kofi's a lock. I would say Hunter's a lock.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more of a position guy. I'm not saying you have to go
point guard. Okay. So I think that makes it really interesting in the Big Ten, because then you get someone like Trace and or Travion Williams, and what do you do with that kind of player?
I would put him on the second team because I just think, and that's no knock on them. I just am more of a guy that I'm gonna kind of slot it like that, where it's 2 guards and 3 bigs, or so. All right, I'm gonna go Jaden Ivey. I'm gonna go Kofi and Hunter.
You got 3.
I'm gonna go EJ Liddell as kind of my 3rd big.
Okay.
Which puts Travion and Trace Jackson Davis on the 2nd team, but could also get onto the 1st. So that answers your part. This could definitely change.
Yeah.
And my man Andre.
You're putting him on there.
I'm going Corbello. Corbello fan.
You're a fan. All right. So I think Corbello's gonna be really, really good. I don't know if he's going to be as good as your guy Jeff Goodman thinks he will be. Because, we were talking to media days. He was like, oh, I think he can, shoot 35%. I was like, I don't think he can shoot that high from the perimeter.
A lot of going under last year.
I think he can shoot 30% from 3. And if he shoots 30% from 3, which I think is doable, because that's only, it was 5 of 31, I think, from last year from 3, which is terrible.
16%.
That's really bad. But I think he can get up to 30%. I've seen him shoot. Illinois had an open practice last week. fundamentally, mechanically, his shot is there. He just needs to stop fading away a little bit. But I think that's just kind of how he has to shoot, or how he grew up having to shoot, because he's littler, slightly undersized. But I would not have him on my preseason All Big Ten, because I don't care as much about the position thing. I would have it Ivy along with Kofi and Hunter Dickinson as well. I would also probably put Trace, and I would probably put Travion on there if I could give. I really like Travion Williams.
Yeah, no, he's a really good player. I think there's like 9 guys you could throw on that list. 9 or 10 guys. Be like, yeah, that's fine.
But I think at the end of the year, I think we're going to end up seeing Jaden Ivey and Curbelo on there at the top. And I think that one of the bigs at the top of the league is going to fall to the second team that's on the preseason All Big Ten, because I think the top 2 or 3 are going to separate themselves from the rest of the league. And I think EJ is a lock to be on there, because like you said, he's not a prototypical 5, but he's not, a 4. Like he's perfect to slide into that like weird combo person on a preseason or postseason All Big Ten roster.
Yeah, no, I'm with that.
Yeah, I used to wish it was by position, but then in the last 2 years, like this league has been so dominated by bigs. Like if we did it by position, we might end up with Alonzo Verge on the second team this year. So no disrespect to Alonzo Verge, really fun player. I'm happy he's in our league.
Yeah, he can get buckets.
Yeah. My team is Jaden Ivey, Kofi, Hunter Dickinson, Trace Jackson Davis, and EJ Liddell. Some tough names to leave off, but I think Purdue's the best team. I think Ivey's going to be the guy. So I got to ride with Ivy. And then I'm hoping I can like wager on this. I hope this is out there somewhere, but Keegan Murray, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's going to be a monster. They won't be good enough for him probably to make All Big Ten, but like Keegan Murray is a guy I'm excited to see with extended minutes.
I think Jonathan Davis at Wisconsin too. Both those guys from last year, watching them play, they've got a lot of upside. But Keegan Murray can go. He's going to be really fun to watch this year.
Before we let you go, is this a turning point year for Wisconsin? Like if things go awry for them, is this the end of like the Greg Gard? I feel like I kind of want to lump Greg Gard and Bo Ryan into the same era, because they're kind of like the same guy theoretically, and it's like the same time frame. But like, is this the end of it for Wisconsin?
I don't know. It seems like he's got good support from the athletic director. What a weird offseason that they had. That was really strange. It's hard to imagine some of the stuff that happened. Kind of just the fact that it happened is insane. Because that dude's one of the best players to ever play there. I don't know if it's the end, but it could. I think some of those young guys are going to have to show some promise. I will say that.
Okay.
That's probably, I think they're going to have to see that there's some positive things coming down the pipeline,
All right. Well, that's all the questions we have. Robbie, we really appreciate you coming on. Where can people hear your games? Like what network do you work for where they can hear you call games, and what else? I know you do something with Jeff. Like what else are you doing outside of calling games?
Yeah. So you can hear me on Big Ten Network. You can hear me on ESPN. I work for both. And then Jeff Goodman and I have a podcast on the Field of 68 network that you can hear on Twitter or YouTube. It just covers college basketball. We have really good guests. We've had great guests. The last like 3 or 4 podcasts we've had has been like Penny Hardaway, Jay Wright, Tony Bennett. So we've had awesome, really good coaches, get some players sometimes during the season. Like last year we had Luka Garza, but it's a fun, like 35-minute listen about kind of national college basketball.
Well, Robbie, thanks for coming on. We appreciate you. You're probably going to be the only gold medalist we ever get on the show. So
never know.
Well,
never know. You might have somebody way better.
Maybe we'll get LeBron or something.
Wait, Alec, hold on. I just realized, isn't Io a gold medalist? Didn't he technically win? It was like a U18 thing.
He probably is.
I guess that counts. All right, Robbie, you're the second.
All right.
You're the second.
Still honored. Me and Io, let's go.
Thanks for coming on, Robbie. We appreciate you, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, Sam, I think that was one of the most fun conversations we've had on the podcast. He was an incredible listen. Obviously, Robbie Hummel knows so much. Make sure to give him a follow on Twitter. It's literally just at Robbie Hummel. His profile picture is pretty funny. It's Michael Jordan in a Cubs jacket with his arm around Robbie Hummel. It's like face photoshopped onto some kid. And his header is even funnier too. I think it's a picture of him and his Purdue teammates with Snoop Dogg. Like, this is a Robbie Hummel that we kind of got to see in our conversation afterward, not the buttoned up one that I think everyone gets to listen to. But yeah, that was awesome. I had a blast.
Yeah, even like the buttoned up version. I mean, Robbie clearly knows the game. He knows ball. It was kind of good to get another mind in here because I feel like we talk so much, our thoughts tend to merge together as groupthink, tends to happen. But I think, to get a new perspective from Robbie and get his thoughts on different teams and players was exciting. And like, man, I wish I could turn off this podcast and go watch like a 46-40 Rutgers Michigan State game right now.
No, you don't.
No, I don't.
I know you. No, you don't.
No, I don't. I'm excited to watch Buccaneers Eagles.
I was gonna say I thought you'd be more excited to turn on like Colorado and Utah or.
Oh, I cannot wait for that. I cannot wait for that.
I know that's what you're really excited about. How can I get a quick Pac-12 scouting report from my Pac-12 resident expert?
UCLA.
I don't care. Give me someone other than UCLA and Oregon. Who's the dark horse in the Pac-12?
I think my USC Trojans are kind of slept on. They bring back their experienced team who brings back a lot of guys from a team that went to the Elite Eight. They got a couple nice transfers. And then we talked about them a little bit, but I like the Arizona Wildcats as well. They'll play Illinois, so we'll see them. And my deep sleeper, I think they were like 7th in the preseason media poll, is Colorado. They lost a lot of guys, but bring back Jabari Walker, could be a first-round pick. Evan Batty, who he's kind of a big body, but you just got to love big body centers. They're well coached. They don't turn the ball over. So those are some of the Pac-12 teams to keep an eye on.
So Drew Peterson is Pac-12 Player of the Year at the end of the year?
He was not on their 10-person preseason first team, which is.
Oh, that's nice to see that they do a 10-person. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Yeah, that's Conference of Champions, though. You can't just cut it to 5.
Okay, so who is the Pac-12 Player of the Year when it's all said and done? I know who you're not going to say because I know both of us don't think it's this person.
Will Richardson, Oregon point guard. I think UCLA will have too many mouths to feed, and I think Richardson will kind of be like the lead guard at Oregon, and they'll be a top 2 team. So Will Richardson is my pick for Pac-12 Player of the Year.
But it will not be who?
Johnny Juzang.
Yes, thank you.
He will not be UCLA's 3rd best player. No.
Thank you for coming to our TED Talk. If there's one takeaway from this episode of Inside the Arc, it's that Johnny Juzang is not UCLA's best player. Don't drink the Kool-Aid, everyone. Yeah. Don't do it. All right.
So this is your Illinois football bye week, but do you have any more basketball content coming out, or what can the people expect from you?
Yeah. So actually, if you get a chance, go read the feature story I wrote on Andre Curbelo, Alfonso Plummer, and RJ Melendez. That is pinned to my Twitter profile at Alec_Bussy. That story got, I guess, some pretty good reviews, and I couldn't have done that story without you, Sim. So thank you for pitching me the story. I'm going to shout you out on that. That was awesome. And thanks for quitting the beat. So you didn't write that story, I guess. Yeah.
I'm glad to see a true journalist with a true passion like you, right? So
no, thank you. But actually, in all seriousness, please go read that story if you get an opportunity to read that. I was really happy I got an opportunity to write it. I had so much fun writing it, and I could tell there was a real joy in especially Andre Curbelo's voice and the way he responded to those questions. And they're all very happy to be from Puerto Rico, which is kind of the root of the story. I will also have a story coming out some point this weekend on Kofi Coburn and how much he cares about his legacy at Illinois and how he wants to be the GOAT of Illinois basketball history, I guess. You can get that to read when it's up on orangeandbluenews.com or illinois.rivals.com, I think is the actual webpage. So you can subscribe there. But yeah, make sure you, more importantly, make sure you read the Curbelo, Plummer, and Melendez story. It's called like It's a Puerto Rican Party, I think is what the headline was. So really happy with that story. Sim, anything you want to plug? I know you're not doing as much writing, but you're still producing some content on YouTube every now and then. Do you want to kind of gas yourself up here?
This is it's a dead period. There's no basketball going on right now. I'm just rewatching old high school games, like trying to catch up on some of the guys in this year's draft class. I might write a big board. I might not. I might just write a draft primer. Kind of depend. Like, I hate ranking players this early in the year because it doesn't really matter. So, like, we'll see. But no, I'll be posting out random clips of random players. And I will say, back to your Puerto Rican story before we wrap up. Did Brad Underwood like it on Twitter?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, so if Brad Underwood can give it a read and like it, then you, loyal listener of Inside the Arc, can like it and read as well. So
that's all the time we have on this edition of Inside the Arc. Again, special thanks to Robbie Hummel for coming on. Super fun conversation. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Thanks for listening, everyone, and enjoy your weekend.